Bluetooth connected.
Yeah, what's
Yeah,
up?
I done flew private a few times. You can't hop on the jet with your shoes on. Broke ass nigga, he still using coupons. Nigga, tell the pilot, go ahead, get a move on.
Come on.
If I want, I can cop me a two-tone Maybach. Can't park the bitch cause it's too long.
Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and today is 2am Rex here, and today we're going to be talking about the lore about my character for the show called the NYC show. It's like a hit game, and I know 2am Jay, shout out to him. He posted his part for episode 1, and I'm going to post my part today, which I'm posting right now, and which I'm working on right now, which I'm recording. So yeah. This is gonna be episode 1 about the background and about my character and the lore. So if you already haven't, please subscribe for more videos like this, and let's get into this lore about my character. And by the way, guys, if you wanted to know that my character for this show is gonna be named Chris, by the way, just to let y'all know if y'all wanted to know. Chris' life started with a tragedy. When he was only 3 years old, both of his parents died, leaving him without a family. He spent most of his childhood moving from one foster home to another throughout New York. Growing up in a foster care system was difficult. He never stayed in one place for long, and it was hard for him to trust people or build lasting relationships. As Chris got older, he began spending more time on the streets. By the age of 14, he had become involved with a gang known as the Blood Ballers. The gang gave him a sense of belonging that he had never felt before. He quickly became known around his neighborhood and was connected to several police investigations over the years. But there was never enough evidence to convict him of any crimes. During his time in the streets, Chris met a guy named J-Dub. The two first crossed paths during a deal and immediately got along. Before long, they became close friends. They spent nearly every day together, going to parties, hanging out at different apartments, listening to music, and talking about their plans for the future. In a world where loyalty was hard to find, Chris considered J-Dub one of the few people he could trust. For years, their relationship seemed unbreakable, but everything changed one night. While hanging out together, a disagreement started over something neither of them thought was serious. At first, what began as a heated argument quickly escalated. Harsh words were exchanged, tempers flared, and soon the two former friends were in a physical fight. Other people nearby eventually broke it up, but the damage to their friendship had already been done. The next day, Chris was walking alone down a sidewalk in his neighborhood. The streets seemed usually quiet. As he walked, he noticed a black car slowly driving by. At first, he ignored it, but after seeing the same car circle the block multiple times, he began suspicious. His heart started racing. Suddenly, the black car screeched to a stop. Two masked men jumped out and rushed toward him. Before Chris could react, gunfire erupted. He felt a sharp pain strike his back and collapsed onto the pavement. The attackers quickly ran back to the car and disappeared down the street. Everything went dark. Hours later, Chris opened his eyes in the hospital room. Machines beeped beside him as doctors checked his condition. Confused and in pain, he asked what had happened. Doctors explained that despite being injured, he was incredibly fortunate. The wounds had not caused major internal damage, and he was expected to recover. According to the medical staff, no permanent damage had been done. As Chris stared at the ceiling of the hospital room, he couldn't stop thinking about the events of the past 2 days. The argument with J-Dub, the black car, the masked men, and the attack all weighed heavily on his mind. For the first time in years, he realized how quickly life on the streets could change, and how dangerous the world around him had become. His friendship with J-Dub was over, and nothing would ever be the same again. After spending several weeks recovering in the hospital, Chris returned home, physically healed, but mentally he was different. The attack stayed on his mind every day. He kept replying the events over and over. The black car circling the block, the masked man jumping out, and the gunshots. He couldn't shake the feeling that the attack wasn't random. Detectives visited Chris multiple times during his recovery. At first, he refused to speak in the streets. Talking to law enforcement was considered betrayal, and Chris had lived by that code for years. But as the investigation continued, police gathered surveillance footage, witness statements, with witness statements and other evidence. As more information came to the light, investigators began focusing on J-Dub and several associates. According to the evidence, the attack appeared to have been planned shortly after the fight between Chris and J-Dub. Months later, arrests were made and prosecutors filed charges related to the shooting. The case quickly became one of the most talked about cases in the neighborhood because of the history between Chris and J-Dub. They had once been inseparable friends, and now they were on opposite sides of a courtroom. When the trial began, Chris was called to testify. Walking to the courthouse was one of the hardest things he had ever done. Reporters stood outside of the building, and the courtroom was packed with people who knew both him and J-Dub. As Chris took the witness stand, he could feel everyone's eyes on him. The prosecutor asked him to describe his friendship with J-Dub. Chris explained how they had met years earlier and how close they had become. He spoke about the parties, the late-night conversations, and the loyalty they once had shared. Then he described how their friendship fell apart after the argument that led to the fight. Finally, he told the jury about the day of the shooting. Chris described seeing the black car circling the block and explained how the attack happened. He answered every question carefully while the courtroom listened in silence. Across the room sat J-Dub. Two former friends associately looked at each other, but neither spoke. The defense attorneys challenged Chris' testimony, trying to raise doubts about what had happened. They questioned his memory of the events and pointed out inconsistencies in witness accounts. My bad for stutter. Chris remained calm and continued answering questions. The trial lasted several weeks. Prosecutors presented evidence, surveillance footage, phone records, and witness testimony. The defense argued that there was not enough proof linking J-Dub directly to the attack. When closing arguments ended, the jury spent days reviewing the evidence before reaching a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the four persons stood and announced the decision. J-Dub was found guilty of attempted murder and several related charges. Some people in the courtroom reacted with shock, while others sat quietly. Chris felt a mix of emotions. There was relief that the case was finally over, but there also was sadness. Years later, J-Dub had been one of his closest friends. Now, their friendship had ended in the courtroom. As officers escorted J-Dub away, Chris remained seated for a moment, staring ahead. The life he had known for years was gone. The streets, the gang, and the friendships that once meant everything to him had led to violence, betrayal, and loss. Leaving the courthouse that day, Chris knew he was standing at a crossroads for the first time. He began thinking seriously about leaving his old life behind and building a different future for himself. Alright guys, if you already have it, please like, subscribe for more videos like this. And if you guys are wondering who is that guy in the story, in Chris' story, that's J-Dub, that's 2AMJ. He's also in the show. My bad for stutter again. He's also in the show. I'm going to put his video up that he posted about his character too. I'm going to put him up the screen. So if you already haven't, please like, subscribe. And 2AM Rex out. Peace. And sorry, this was a long video. 2AM Rex out. Peace.